I got to reboot my computer. Hey everybody, welcome to, actually this is week 99. I double counted week 96 somewhere along the way. Yeah, I'm not an accountant, and so I get lost in the double digits evidently. So week 99, next week, the 100th week anniversary. So we're excited about that. Once everybody starts ramping on, I'll make another announcement about that, because you may or may not want to be interested in it. But you know the drill. Hit us with Q&As, harass us in the chat. I thought what I'd do is to talk a little bit and tee it up with both Jack and Adam. Adam, you are in for a treat when you see Adam, because he's got all kinds of snowflakes in his background. He's in our Hendersonville office, squatting in one of our employees' offices. So anyway, the feng shui, I think Adam went in and just put up all the snowflakes and stuff just to make himself feel at home. But anyway, I've talked to a couple CFOs, fractional CFOs, Robert Mayetta, Survival CFO, as well as Ken LeGlenn. And the reason I wanted to go with a couple fractional CFOs is because they talk with a lot of CEOs that they serve. And I said, hey, just with all this crazy uncertainty that is now crazy again, thanks to Mr. Putin, what are the things that you're hearing from your CEOs? What are the things that are keeping them up at night, in addition to all these stuff that normally keeps founders and entrepreneurs and CEOs up? And so I figured I would just list out a few of these things and topics, and then let you guys pontificate as you so desire. And if it spurs a question out there in the audience, cool. The more questions, the better. And if you have thoughts about this stuff. So the first thing is supply chain issues, and that has all kinds of ramifications, getting squeezed on cash flow. I talked with one of my coaching clients this week, and they've got projects that are going 2 and 3 times the normal duration. Well, that has impact on cash flow, as well as a number of other things, if they've got callbacks or whatever. So they're doubling down on some of that. Pushback on price increases. Another question is, do we stock up and potentially get stuck holding lots of inventory if recession hits, which who knows, et cetera. So that's one, supply chain issues. And number 2, interest rates, what's going to be going on. Well, none of us have crystal balls, obviously. And now I'm hearing speculation this morning that the Fed is going to probably tamp down their more aggressive interest rate hikes, but we'll see. What can we do now to hedge rising rates? Another one was just hiring challenges. It's still a huge issue. New demands, by new hires. How's that affect, retaining current employees, et cetera. Then always pricing, margins, cash flow, that kind of stuff. And then Robert did also mention, if we had anything new on EIDL, some of those things are still out there evidently, and R&D tax credits, because not everybody is taking advantage of R&D tax credits. And we do have some expertise in that area as well. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. So Adam, since you've got the snowflakes, let's go ahead and go with you.
Well, let me address all 6 right now. So get out your pen and sheet of paper, Jack. You got plenty of salt time now. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I probably, if you're okay, if we kind of hit on the employee / inflation / price increase question first, and then maybe the supply chain contract delivery stuff second. That'll give Jack plenty of time to research the contract supply chain issue, because I feel like that's probably going to be more of a contract / legal question in some respects. But on the employee price increase thing, so my own feeling on that is if you just start with the acceptance of the reality that we're in, you know, the acceptance of the reality that we're in is that this was coming. Like, this is not pandemic related. The pandemic just accelerated this problem. And the problem is my generation didn't have as many babies as my dad's generation. That's why they're called the baby boom. Sorry, they didn't have as many kids as their parents' generation. That's why they're called the baby boomers, and I'm called Generation X. So there's just less of us, relative to the people that are hiring. So, no matter what was going to happen, there was going to be a reduction in the overall labor force. And, you end up with the basic laws of supply and demand. I mean, if there's a reduction in the labor force, what does that mean? Labor is scarce. What does that mean? Prices increase in terms of what I have to pay with that labor. What are my choices in terms of what to do with that? Pass it on to my customer, try to get more efficient to pay for it, or bend over and take it, or some combination of all the three. So the reality of, tight labor market, my own feeling is just like having to transition to a virtual work environment was thrust upon us, but we were kind of moving in that direction anyway. Scarcity of labor, like this whole, I'm getting this whole thing about people are, government still paying people. Unemployment ran out. That's BS. What is happening is that if I can get paid $20 at Amazon to put in my headphones with a great benefits package, why do I want to wait tables? That's true. If I can make $20 at Amazon with no college degree and benefits, why do I want to finish my college degree and become an accountant to start at 50? That's true. Like, all these, those are all true statements. So, there's just more competition for the labor. So that just means we all got to pay more. And I've had some peer CEOs that have said, well, somehow we avoided that because, we treated people, but what you avoided it temporarily. Eventually people are going to understand what their market rate is worth. And that's going to cut. You can't permanently paying people lower than the market is not a viable strategy. That is a temporary tactical solution that ultimately is going to catch up to you. So you got to get to market. And what I found is with labor, man, that market probably isn't going to correct itself. So if you just think about this generically, if you look at whatever the inflation rate is of 7%, I think is the latest number. It's somewhere in that range. Robert will probably correct me on that. I appreciate you for that, Robert.
7.5 was the latest.
Okay, 7.5. I'm making this up, but if you just kind of indirectly think of what is labor as a component of price in the overall economy, probably 3% of that inflation rate was just the one-time labor increase. Do I think these rates are going to be sustainable over the long haul? No. I mean, I think these increases were like a one-time recognition of the scarcity of the labor market. Like, eventually it'll level off, but I don't think it's going to go down. So my point in saying all that is, I think we got to accept that a lot of this inflationary stuff, maybe half of it was permanent. The rest of it is all about the scarcity of a commodity resource, due to a backlogging production that can ultimately get caught up due to people being shut down. We can't replace the people though. So, from that perspective, you kind of stuck with, all right, I got to figure out how to make this work. And what it also means is that I got to double down on my employee retention so that they're not very interested in going on and moving to other people. And, frankly, that's hard. It's hard. It's hard to build a culture where people are willing to stay. Because if you think about what did you kind of have pre-pandemic, if you're truly honest with yourself, what you had pre-pandemic is that, Gary, I'm using you just because you're on my screen, not because I truly believe this, but what you basically had was Gary saying, I don't know, man, is the grass really greener on the other side? You know, it's not even that much more money to make a switch. The devil I know, da da da. So while I was over here about, oh, my retention is great, blah, I'm the greatest, best boss in the world. That was not reality. Reality is Gary was lazy. Well, now,
Amen. If you know me, you know I'm lazy.
yeah. Now the money equation has changed. So suddenly, I don't know, the grass may not be greener, but that's a lot of money. So, or something else changed. I mean, you know, we lost, for the first time ever, we lost a staff accountant to a competitor CPA firm. You know, she knew that the raise that she was going to get was probably going to be, you know, somewhat equivalent. We just hadn't done it yet. This is to work remotely permanently in Dallas. She lives in Charlotte. I don't even know how it's going to work. That's crazy to me. I feel like it could be only temporary. God bless her for doing it. I wish her luck, but you know, that's just the reality we live in. Like, I would have had to double down on the culture and the touchy feely and the blah, blah, blah. And I was not doing that, you know, frankly, in this person's situation. So I think you also got to double down on your retention strategies, because it's not like these people can magically, you know, there's not a people tree. Like, you know, we can't go back. We can't put ourselves in a time machine, rewind the clock, you know, 23 years ago and suddenly say, hey, let's get busy reproducing. You know, the ship sailed. And I think that if you're in there playing the victim right now, saying it's just because the lazy people don't want to work, that's not it. You're lying to yourself. Get over it. That's not it. There's less people. And all the pandemic did is it accelerated some people exiting the workforce that were going to exit anyway at some point in the future, whether it was, you know, moms deciding to take care of their kids leaving for a period of time, or it was older people that decided, you know, about, you know, I think you could make the case, well, you know, there's some Gen Zers or whatever that really just are now into work-life balance. I don't think that's a significant enough portion of the population to really account for how bad this currently is. I think the people who are really looking at it are more of the mindset of I am, that this was happening. You know, it just got accelerated. So now we're dealing with it. But I think it's all related, you know, in terms of, you know, you're paying higher prices due to labor. Part of that is permanent. You're paying higher wages to your employees, so you're getting squeezed on both ends. Your product is costing more, plus your employees are demanding more, and you're trying to figure out what to do with your you know, what to do on your end. And it's like, look, I mean, it's just got to be a lot of honest, sincere, we value the business type discussions around price increases. You know, or you try to get more efficient and let that soak it up, or you just say, well, at least we're still here and taking the shorts on the profitability.
Yeah, and I would echo all of that. And I think that the main focus of employees is certainly cash. Cash is king. And we've also experienced, and we've had clients who've experienced that it's just about money. And you have, you know, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that are, you know, maybe haven't started a family, that are, okay, that's great. And the pandemic has provided an avenue of more leverage by the employee to be able to say, yeah, I think 4-day work week works for me. I think that after I go pick up my kid from school to take them to the dentist, I'm just going to go home and work from home remotely for the rest of the day. I think I need more PTO. I think I need more vacation days per year. So some of the non-cash stuff that is expenses to you as a business owner, certainly play a big part of that. And we've seen that just continue to happen over and over again. Similar situation for a client that, it's like, well, key employee has a spouse that got an awesome job in another big city and wants to work remotely. And we don't know if we should let her do that. And I said, well, and so we kind of, it really isn't necessarily a legal decision. It's an economic decision. So we walk through kind of the pluses and minuses and, how important is this person to the business and all those things. So it's definitely a shortage of people, but also the individuals having more leverage and negotiating power to get certain things where in the past you're like, no, and it'd be even offensive for them to even ask such a thing of an employer. So in moving into the supply chain issues from a legal perspective, what we've been doing in our contracts is, and well, let me take a step back. The term force majeure in its purest form means something that was unanticipated. And the effect of the force majeure event is that it has an impact on the performance or the ability to perform by one or both of or all of the parties. And what was interesting is at the beginning of the pandemic, that was arguably a force majeure event that impacted all of us. But as time goes on and you start entering into contracts during the pandemic, it's not so much unforeseen. Then the argument became, well, the unforeseen consequences of people getting COVID, not coming into the workplace, of the supply chain being impacted, of prices going up, and now with all the stuff that's going on overseas, an event of war that may have an impact on us over here on this side of the pond. So what we've been doing is adding in, and we were doing it in the force majeure clause, but you can't just simply put in epidemic, pandemic, supply chain issues into that paragraph because of what I said. It's meant to be the unexpected. So once you have something that is expected or is happening, you have to kind of treat it a little differently and basically say, well, we're going to call this a force majeure event, but you're really focusing on not the actual event, but the consequences. And it kind of blends together because the pandemic, it's not as if there's a set time. I guess maybe whenever the World Health Organization actually declared a pandemic would be technically the official start of it. But you have before and after that has an impact on the supply chain. So we've put in, and when I say supply chain, I'm not just talking about necessarily goods and that are being manufactured and sold. I'm also talking about services. I'm talking about in lease agreements. So if we have a client that is negotiating with a landlord and they're concerned about lumber, they're concerned about labor, they're concerned about governmental entities having the capacity to send the fire marshal to go inspect the sprinkler system. We are building in a few escape hatches, temporary escape hatches into documents so that it deals with those situations where there is an interruption in what would be the normal schedule of constructing a facility as a franchisee, as a business owner, that, for all those reasons that we said. So the supply chain issues from a legal perspective and a contracting perspective need to be dealt with a little bit differently than they may have been in the past, where it is, okay, well, a week or two delay on a construction project, no big deal. It's kind of normal. We know that the fire marshal, they're just either understaffed or they just, they'll get around to you when they get around to you. And it's just kind of a known thing in the construction industry here in Charlotte. So those are the kind of things that you need to be thinking about from a legal perspective. And then we'll dabble into the financial perspective a little bit, in that when you start building in pro formas into a project, you need to have a higher reserve for the unknowns, for delays, for increase in costs. And in the example where you're building something, you're constructing something that takes over the course of time, that I would, in a document that was signed 9-10 months ago for a build out that takes about a year, the costs are significantly increased. An interesting tangent, so I deal in the franchise world, is franchisors who are required in their disclosures to provide cost estimates and ranges in the disclosure document that is used to provide information to you, but essentially induce you as a franchisee to enter into the franchise system. Well, those estimates are way understated in some instances because of increase in costs. So those are other things you need to consider too, but that kind of gets you thinking along the lines of that, okay, things that are represented now or represented 8-9 months ago are going to be different, and they're going to continue to be impacted. And so, until the supply chain gets corrected. But to Adam's point about what is temporary and what is maybe permanent, we may be seeing some permanency or longevity in some of these issues, that maybe it's okay that you can't readily go to your nearest Harris Teeter and get portable coffee cups. Personal experience recently this week. So, but I also do what I think a lot of us do now. It's like, okay, I went to the Harris Teeter and the Publix on the way home, and then I went to Amazon. I'm not going to go and do what we all did 10-15 years ago, which is go to Target to Target to Target, or maybe Kmart to Kmart, just not, or Harris Teeters. It's just not going to happen. So anyway, kind of went off on some tangents, but just some thoughts on supply chain issues.
So I do want you to talk a little bit more, Adam, on cash flow levers that we could in a normal situation, things that we're looking for and things that we've got clients that we're advising them on how to, improve their cash flow. But before we do that, two kind of public service announcements. Now that we've got a full body of people here, next week is our 100th week anniversary. We are going to do a live studio audience. If any of you want to participate in the live studio audience, let us know. Email me today, gfrey@trustbgw.com, and we'll make sure that you're on the invitee list. We're going to limit it. We're going to be in the karaoke room at 820 Hamilton at the Music Factory. It's going to be fun. The owners of that have graciously opened up their space, and they also own VBGB across the street. If you've never been to either one, they're both really cool. And then we're going to do it live, as well as we're going to still do via webinar. So that's an important thing. But the 100th week anniversary, and here's what's going to happen. We're going to deal with, we won't be able to get to all of them, but to everybody who registers and shows up on the live webinar, or shows up live if you've said, I want to come and I want an invitation, because it will be by invitation only. We're probably only going to have 20 or so people there. You will get the complete list of our top 100 questions that we hear from business owners in the last couple of years. So that we will give to everybody. But again, and that's what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with as many of those things as we can with a live studio audience, and there will be some refreshments that served there, I think. So anyway, that's number one. Number two is anybody that is filing in North Carolina. We have delayed, even though we may have tax returns ready, because North Carolina has not opened their e-file portal. I don't know why. North Carolina has been the laggard on PPP, deductibility, all kinds of stuff, but supposedly they're opening their e-file portal on the 28th. So we do see light coming. So that's another important thing. And then the final thing is, if anybody notices on my clock, it's 12:30 because I never changed. I never changed the clock. And guess what? Good news. I'm not going to change it because daylight savings time is coming up on March 13th. So there you go. We did have one comment, Bert. I agree. We do need a good immigration system, as there are many people looking for opportunities to work and live in the United States. I agree with that. Yes, e-file for, filing electronically. Sorry, Ginger. Hopefully that addresses. Date filing again for North Carolina opening up e-file is the 28th, is what we're hearing lately. A couple weeks ago, I heard the 15th. Well, that came and went. Yeah, you bet, Ginger. So
Before you go on, can I give one
Yeah.
piece of free legal advice?
oh,
Would that be
please,
okay. Okay.
please.
So sharing this because I voluntold one of our young associates to write a short client alert on this, but it's something that came up in the annual NC Bar Association Business Law section meeting, which is a reminder that assumed names, DBAs, that there was a 5-year window that you have, well, they changed the system to a central filing system. So while you can get on the internet and get on the Secretary of State's website and you file your DBA. So just as kind of a refresher, DBA, assumed name is, so your company is XYZ Corp or LLC, but you're doing business as Jack's Hot Dogs. And so you need to, and previously in the county of your principal office, you needed to file this document. So what happens is you still have to say, my principal office is in Mecklenburg County, but you file it with the Secretary of State. So there's this 5-year window, which is coming to an end. And in order to continue and maintain your DBA, which if you use it over the course of time may also be, you may have trademark rights to it, common law trademark rights if you're not registered, you need to file, essentially refile in some cases. So there will be an official client alert about that, but I just wanted to make as many people aware of that because I think that a lot of people filed that years ago, maybe decades ago, and like, yeah, I'm good. So just something new that's come up. So there you go.
And free legal advice. How many times do you get that? That's, really good. So thank you, Jack. So one other public service announcement in the chat from Robert Mayetta. He has a client that applied for an EIDL modification yesterday. They got approved today. He was shocked about how fast the system's become. That's pretty amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So Adam, I want to go back to this whole, cash flow. What are some of the levers that somebody can be doing? Because I have heard this a lot in the last 2 weeks about cash flow.
Yeah. So, I mean, the ultimate lever is your hip. And if you practice your ostrich, the ostrich putting your head in the sand is whoop, 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 whoop. Yeah, cash flow's terrible. Whoop. Get any better? Yeah, I did. Anywho, don't do that. So I don't know if I'm not going to get sophisticated with the whiteboard this time around. So can we see this?
Yes.
Kind of here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, in terms of this particular question about cash flow, I think the relevant question really is around, all right, I've had some cost structure changes. What do I need to do about that? Potentially. So using this as your example, P&L, sales of $1 million, budgeted profit of 200 grand, assuming that your bottom line EBITDA is around 20%, it's going to be whatever it is. I mean, what you have to figure out is, what are we doing with the stuff in the middle there? If I'm unwilling to raise prices and I'm unwilling to move on my budgeted profit, well, my rent's my rent. I can't really do much about that unless I evaluate, can I reduce that somehow? My other overhead expenses are going to be mostly fixed. Like there might be some variability in there that I can squeeze out, but I always think of those other overhead expenses for people, sort of like I think about the endowment for the arts when we talk about the federal budget. It's fun to laugh at and make fun of and use as a rallying cry for government spending gone awry, but at the end of the day, it really isn't a lot of money. Every nickel adds up, but even if you added up all the nickels, you got a dollar, not, billions. So anyway, you're kind of left with materials and labor. So, in some cases you can't do much on the materials side other than, can I make sure that I'm buying right, making sure I'm getting appropriate discounts. If I can use a lower cost material, can I do that? So you're really left with labor, and can I do the same amount with less people? That's what you're stuck with. I mean, at the end of the day, this is an equation that must be balanced, somehow. And you're kind of stuck with, how do I balance it? So my point in saying this is that for anybody that's kind of like, what do I do about cash flow? My suggestion is to take a step back and do, just some thinking about, my cost structure has changed probably permanently. So let me take a step back and ask myself, what am I going to do with that to balance this equation? You can't fix that overnight. Like, in other words, you can't magically buy more right overnight. You can't necessarily, I mean, I suppose you could walk in and say, well, math told me I need to get rid of 3 people. You, and you. Pack your shit. Get out of here. You could do that. I wouldn't do that, but you could do that. But what you could do is to say, look, we're not going to replace some positions. People that are close to retirement, you could encourage them to retire. People that were marginal performers, you could actually say, look, either we're going to get something out of you, or this is the year that we're actually going to do something about the marginal performance. But somehow you've got to bring the equation in balance, because everything else is just sort of like a short-term little band-aid, fix on improving your cash flow temporarily. In this case, in most of our clients' case, there's been a permanent structural change that must be dealt with. And the only way to deal with it is to balance your equation. How are you going to balance it?
One thing that I'd add into that, and I've run across this in the last month with a couple clients. One is actually I'm on the board of, and they do, they supply mining equipment in high explosive environment. And they had to go in, buy product line, look at their profitability, deal with their sales incentive structure, because they had salespeople based on that were incented that didn't make sense for the profitability of the company. So they were spending time on low profit margin items. So looking at your profitability on your widgets or your services, and by client too, and by customer. I'm surprised actually at how many clients that I've run into or have been working with where they thought they knew, but they really didn't go in, do an analysis by product or by client. And they were afraid, especially in one case, they were afraid because 25% of their client base and their sales was tied up in this one humongous client. When they did the analysis, they found out they were taping $35 to every invoice. They were losing $35 on a client that was 25% of their client base.
Yeah.
And so, but when they had the data, and this goes back to some of the things that we talked about, the 7 deadly sins, a week ago, is you got to know your numbers. And if you don't have somebody like a Robert Mayetta or a Ken LeGland or somebody like that, or your accounting firm isn't actually advising you, you got to get somebody to help you to really know your numbers, because ignorance is not bliss. It can be deadly. So anyway, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I would reiterate that. And I'm embarrassed to say guilty as charged. I mean, if you just look at BGW as an example, there's a great book called the 80-20 principle that, is based on, the 80-20 principle. But it, it basically walks you through the process of doing exactly what Gary just suggested, which is really looking at where are you, do you have profitable, because that's another part of this equation. Where do you have profitable customers or not? And with the thought, with the proof that what you find is that while 80-20 is just a concept, every company out there has their version of it, whether it's 60-40, it could be 90-10, whatever it is, it's something. So just using BGW as an example, we have, roughly, I want to say 4,500, tax return, like individual tax returns or people that we bill, like invoices that we raise to specific individuals. 800 of those account for 80% of our revenue. 200 of those account for 60% of our revenue, just to give you an example of what that looks like in our business. So knowing that, you can pretty quickly get down to, we have a client in Myrtle Beach. It's a restaurant client. I will not shame them on this call, but in doing the analysis, to Gary's point of $35 on every invoice, in this case, we're paying them $20 an hour to do their work. I'm going to say that out loud again. We're paying them $20 an hour to do their work. Now we're trying to fix a situation or help them find another home, but we're paying them $20 an hour to do their work. Well, how does it translate back into my equation? Well, that equation is, okay, I might reduce my top line number by the amount of that client not being here, but I can either choose to then let the corresponding labor go because I don't need it anymore, or I can replace it with revenue that is of a higher quality that gets my bottom line profit back in balance. So thanks for reminding me of that, Gary. Now I'm angry and I'm going to eat bad at lunch. So I don't drink anymore. I got to have some comfort somehow.
Well, it's the whole point of that is, and in both of these cases, these are multi-million-dollar businesses. They're good-sized businesses, but it's really easy to miss the basics and think that, oh no, we know. Oh no, we know. Well, if you haven't been checking it in the last year, you probably don't know. And it's scary when you're going to your biggest client and they've got 25% of your, top line and thinking, oh, I got to give price increases. What happens if they go away? I'm like, well, if they go away and you don't increase your prices, you can jump up and down and sing hallelujah because you just gave yourself a pay raise, when you're losing that much money on them. So anyway, it's a lot of people think, well, gosh, I'm embarrassed. I don't, gosh, look at me. I don't have it together. Nobody does, just go back to the basics. So anyway, enough on that rant. Jack.
Yes.
Anything from your standpoint on any of these other topics, or if you want to talk about cash flow, you can talk about cash flow too. But I'd be curious.
Kind of relatedly, since we're talking about labor in kind of the regime of cash flow and being controllable, or something that's in our control and all of that. And I also want to talk about leases, but in a moment. But on the labor side of things, so I'll give you an example in our shop at our law firm. So as time has gone on and we've embraced technology and other tools that are provided that are specifically for service industries like CPA firms and law firms, et cetera. So we become more efficient and mindsets have changed. So the ones who said, never will I ever work remotely out of the office because I need to be in my office with my computer, with my dictaphone, with my assistant outside my door, ready to go. And that's the most efficient method. Well, as it turns out, not so much, but the game changer is technology, I think. And I've always thought that as technology but it's also very much a crutch for all of us, because when it doesn't work right, then it's like the whole world comes to a complete standstill. And so we've implemented things. We have to do timesheets. Well, we have a program that works directly with our accounting software that, and because we can do, it's on our phone, it's an app with voice recognition. So I am now talking into my computer to do my timesheets, which then my assistant cleans up, but she's not the one that's doing it. She is not either translating dictation from a machine, and she is not trying to decipher my scribbles on a piece of paper that are my timesheets. And then for example, dictation. It is, if I want to record something, I talk into my phone, I push a button, and it goes straight to her computer. As far as writing stuff up. So imagine this process. The old process was print out a 50-page document. I mark it up. My assistant will implement those changes, run a red line, then I review the red line, all in paper, and all this process of going to the printer and coming back and doing all these things. Versus now, okay, I can on my iPad use GoodNotes or another program with a pen, mark things up, push a button, it goes, she implements it, comes back to me electronically, and I can review it. So I've just now taken away maybe a few minutes, but exponentially or multiplied that by the number of times that you're doing that. Another example would be because we, the attorneys, are taking more on us through these tools, instead of it being a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning attorney to assistant, we are in some cases 4-to-1, 5-to-1. And so we can take maybe 2 partners and 2 associates and put them together. And it flows because the assistant now, the legal assistant, is kind of a hub of information flow, and it's coming in and going out in a more efficient process, in a more efficient way. So instead of hiring an additional legal assistant, we now have marginal capacity that has been increased because of technology. So those are the things, but if you don't take the time to look inward and say, okay, it's not really broken, so there's not really anything to fix, I think is kind of putting your head in the sand. I can't do the motions as good as Adam might be able to do it, but literally, yeah, there you go. Yes, like maybe, how's that? All right, so but so do look around and see, and I get it, for older generations, technology is kind of scary. It's getting kind of scary for me, some of the way that my kids maneuver technology. I mean, they're making movies on their phones. Like, we'll go do something and they're putting music to, we were at a skate park or ski park up in Winter Place for a couple of days, and they're doing the sliding on their skis, and I mean, Olympic inspired stuff. And then while we're on the lift, they're putting music to it. And then by the time we get to the top of the lift, there's a full produced video in slow motion with snow going every direction when they slid into the camera, because one kid was holding it down low. So all those things, so embrace it. Don't be fearful, but look and see if there are efficiencies. And it likely means an investment on the front end of money into this technology. But you're going to find, I think, that the cost is not significant, because the companies that produce the software, they're more about getting it out there in quantity. I mean, yeah, quality, but they're looking for the marginal revenue of getting it out to as many law firms, CPA firms, et cetera, as possible in order to generate the revenue. So it's not terribly expensive, and the price of technology always comes down for the most part until the next new, bigger, better thing comes into existence, and then you got to pay the premium if you want to be first in line to get that next iPhone 15 or whatever number we're at now.
Yeah, it's still 13, I think.
Okay.
I'm still on 11 Pro, but anyway, one other thing we think about this, all right, so it's almost 2 years that we've been doing this, almost. And I think about some of the things that I think we did right at BGW, which was we could see the smoke on the horizon and we knew that there was going to be some stuff coming down. We didn't know what, but we had some contingency plans on how to deal with cash flow, how to preserve cash if we needed to, because we didn't know that there were going to be governmental programs, we didn't know. And so, it was kind of officers eat last was the plan, where management team was going to take some cuts. And then if we had to go to the next year, et cetera. And we had kind of our work from home strategies planned out already. And so what I would say is, going back to Adam's, the ostrich move, that didn't serve anybody. When I think about the clients or business owners that I know of that did that, well, 2 weeks, they said it's just going to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve. If they didn't pivot, if they didn't get creative and think about, all right, so what do we do? We're going to have to do takeaway, and curbside service if we had a restaurant. We're going to have to limit our hours, blah, blah, blah. They aren't in business anymore. And it's really sad, actually. I've got friends that lost their businesses. They had everything on the line. They lost their businesses. They either couldn't pivot because they were in an industry and they couldn't pivot fast enough, and the relief didn't come fast enough, or they just, failed to address, what they could address. So, and they did the same thing. So, I don't know that, who knows what tomorrow's going to bring. We don't know, but I think it is important. The other thing that I thought we did well was it wasn't just Adam as the great man, thinking it up and then issuing an edict. The management team was involved in it. And go down, ask people, what are the things that we can do? Ask the front line. The closer you can get to the front line, the better for some of these answers a lot of times. So again, bonehead simple stuff that oftentimes we miss just because we're in the tyranny of the urgent. So
something else to consider, Gary, is habits, change of habits. So we're talking about pivoting and changing and not being able to spend money just kind of willy-nilly, meaning like doing everything. I'm talking about business development and marketing, but going out and spending on everything, just to be in the room to possibly get a new client or customer, and going through the exercise of tightening up. For us, for example, okay, who are the targets when you're going to this particular meeting? What is the possible return on investment? How many contacts have you made? Is this the first contact or the fifth contact? Who else in the firm, in the office, would be a good teammate for this particular client, whether it's an potential employment issues, whether it is maybe litigation issues, maybe it's intellectual property. So, but with all of this restriction, do you now continue with that process, or do you say, well, we've been conservative for long enough, we're going to open the floodgates and go back to old habits, or go back to the way it was? And it may be that there's a happy medium, that it is, you need to increase your spending just because you closed down really significantly to conserve cash. But hopefully it's not that, well, now we're going to catch up for all of the holding back. We're going to double our prior business development budget in order to catch up with those things, because surely we've missed opportunities. So you get into kind of this FOMO mode, and then you overspend. So that is, and I've seen that. I've seen the discipline and I've seen the lack of discipline on that issue of maintain the better habits or going back to old habits that now really are not so good.
Well, I think we dealt with a lot of the stuff on the list that, thanks to Robert, thanks to Ken for giving us some additional insights, which is important. If there's anything that we've missed out there, let us know. And again, you guys are in for a treat next week where we'll go into the top 100 questions. I've already seen some of the list, which is pretty cool, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And we'll the live studio audience will have the benefit of having some of those questions that they can tee up live for us, which will be fun. The only other thing that we didn't talk about was, what happens if, should I buy a bunch of inventory? What happens if, recession hits and then I get stuck with that inventory, et cetera? What I would say is make sure that your CFO or your fractional CFO or your brightest financial mind in your company is thinking through strategically the various scenarios, because it is a bit of a gamble. And it can be high stakes in a lot of cases. So make sure that they're involved. Quite frankly, I think a good CFO should be one of the most strategic minds in the company.
Yeah, that's right. And the way that I'd answer that question is that if you don't face a lot of obsolescence risk, meaning like, hey, if I sell if I buy something and I sell it a month from now, I could also sell it, a year from now or 2 years from now, or repurpose it or whatever. If you don't face a lot of obsolescence risk, then your real risk is really cash flow. So my suggestion there would be, maybe use debt. If you got stuck up because you're really worried about supply chain issues, use some debt, like a line of credit or something, to buy it, so you're not tying up your own cash in it. But if you face obsolescence risk, meaning like, I'm really worried about running out of it, but a year from now, it's going to be obsolete. It's like, I don't know, man. that was me. The risk of being you got to balance that risk of being sold out and not getting the sale versus getting stuck with a significant obsolete inventory that you're writing off. At least you get a tax benefit of it. You get 30 cents on the dollar that you paid for it as a tax benefit. So you should factor that in. Like the net cost of the obsolescence, you're at least getting a write-off for it. So factor that in. It's like, that's going to be your pros and cons list. Didn't make the sale because I didn't have the inventory based on obsolescence risk, versus it's obsolete, but I at least get a tax deduction for it. So what's the net cash out of pocket? And, make your call based on that. And then go like this, whoop.
Yeah, you got that thing down, man. Any last minute questions? Thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. And again, if you came on late and you missed the front part of it, no worries. We'll put it up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later today. We'll do the same thing next week on the 100th week anniversary at 820 Hamilton. And again, send me an email if you want to be part of the live studio audience. It's not Johnny Carson. It's not, Jimmy Fallon, but it's in Charlotte. You don't have to catch a plane to see either one of them. Well, you can't see.
Well, I will say it's a really cool venue. So it's built to have an audience. So it has the stadium seating for the audience. We are going to provide some food and beverage. We were asked if there was going to be alcoholic beverages. I don't think that's appropriate for Thursday lunchtime. Maybe if we're there till 5 o'clock, maybe. But it's
no,
Tom
we're not.
And Kara, yeah, right. Tom and Kara are very gracious hosts to allow us to use the space, and it's really cool. So looking forward to it, and I think we're gonna have a lot of fun. But yeah, as Gary said, all of you have rights of first refusal, short-term rights of first refusal to come and join us next week, and we're happy to have you if you have availability to do so.
Cool. All right, last call. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks, Robert, for giving us some good insights and for good EIDL news. That was always encouraging. And Adam, have a safe trip back to Charlotte. Watch out for all those snowflakes on the walls as well as in the air.
Well, it's about
you.
65 degrees up here in Hendersonville, so I think
Is
I'm
it
probably
really?
pretty safe today. Yeah, it's
Oh,
really
there
nice.
you go.
So,
Good. All right. Have a safe trip back.
all right,
Thanks,
see you
guys.
guys.
See y'all.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Bye.